Homelessness 2.0, day 63. Doing this again, but I've already done it again. This isn't the first or second rodeo with regards to heating up these pizzas in here. Just turned it on. It's the last of my pizza though. Bought it New Year's Eve because I moved in here New Year's Eve, and even though I'd already had some food to eat that day, still pretty hungry, and you know, it's late. It's like, well, I might as well just, you know, instead of ordering Uber Eats or something, I can get, you know, some pizza that's going to be a lot cheaper. Because the pizza's cheap. Hopefully I didn't turn it off. Lean it up against some towels. It's cold. It's fucking here, even though it's like 61 outside. It's almost 1 p.m. and I pretty much just woke up because I can't, like, it's just too cold. So I gotta talk to the lady who runs the place. I see about getting her to invest in. She had already mentioned it when I was talking to her about getting a heater. But yeah, we're gonna need to get something. Thinking probably like a portable radiator or something like that. But because like I brought mine, and it's just not powerful enough. It's not big enough. Like it worked in my last room, because my last room was like an 8x8 room. This room in here, it's like 15 by 20 maybe. It's big. It's a big ass room. It's about as big as the other one, in fact. But, you know, comparably speaking, I mean, that other spot had the heater, and it was like, it was a heater for a house, basically. For a whole space. Even though that one specific thing was the heater, there's no, like, ducting or anything. So it's just, you know, an ambient, I guess. It doesn't, you know, utilize any kind of way of heat transmission. But after I ate the pizza, take a shower, I'm gonna go get some food. I'm gonna have to get stuff that's like cheap cooking. You know, I'm gonna do more, because I think I have down here another, yeah, there's a pan down here too. Oh, shit. That's not usually a good thing to put. And it's a different kind of pan, but it seems like it's got a Teflon coat on it as well. But I'm gonna do a lot of what I've been doing, which is, you know, like cheap meals that are easy and you can heat up, and stuff like that. I mean, you know, right now I'm not really into cooking just because I'm like, I don't want to have to do any work, but I need to get a couple of microwavable meals too. So I'm going to have a couple of staples regarding that. Also, like, there's this countertop here. Like, on the other side, there would have been a table sitting here. So, here's the countertop. It's a little messy right now. Because pizza boxes, now that they're empty, they're going to need to go out. Yeah, I'm going to have to go to the grocery store later today. I was considering doing it before showering, but it's just going to be whatever. I need to take a shower because that'll help warm me up a little bit too. And like, there's not a lot going on over here. There's some kind of like aesthetic she's trying to go for. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a lot more white. It's a lot more bright, and it is a lot less my type. Like the light that's in the room, the overhead light for the ceiling fan, is a really bright blue light, whitish blue temperature light. So, like, for those who may not notice, or know rather, like for instance, this light, other than it being kind of on the dull side because of the thing that it's in, let's reposition you just a little bit. There, better, I think. That is, a lower color temperature light. It's your warm lights. It's your reddish or yellowish lights. The ones that you're going to get more from an incandescent bulb. Interestingly, like, there's a cultural thing behind that, too. At least from what I understand. It's been a while since I've heard about it, and it could have been just some bullshit. I'm not exactly sure, but supposedly, and again, and this is just a supposedly, it's not this is verified by, years of science kind of thing. But my understanding is, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, and I'm okay with being wrong. And if I find out, I'm not going to be pissed. Because I really don't have any stake in it either. Which is one of the things that most people are okay with being wrong about if they have no stake in it. If they have, if they're really adamant about something, it means that they have something in it. They've invested something into it. Whether it be money or time or individual self, whatever, identity, if you will. But my understanding is that, generally speaking, Americans tend to like the warmer colors of lights, whereas, I think it was the British, maybe, like the colder temperature lights. It doesn't matter, really. That's just more of a, hey, I'm having a conversation, bullshit kind of stuff. So it doesn't really matter. So, it doesn't really matter. Though, well, I don't know why I said it that way or at all. I feel like there's less space, but there kind of is because, there's this thing right here. So there's this thing, this little caddy, which it's purposeful, but it's in the way. And then there's the knife block. There's no reason to get these, by the way. You generally don't need this many knives, and these don't even look like they're clean. And that sounded like it had. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but it sounds like there may be something inside. I don't know. I'm probably not going to use either one of these. So most of the counter space is over here instead of over here. So on the flip side over there, the counter space was here, and then the sink was further over. And so, this could be the prep area for when you're cooking shit. It'd still be doable, but I'll probably just end up using this side more for dishes and stuff when time comes, because that way I won't have to worry too much about my prep side being covered with anything for the most part. And I'm gonna give it a couple of minutes. It's at 400 now. It's 1250. Bigger pieces of pizza this time around, and I'm gonna use these guys like I did last night. To pull it out. Thumb doesn't really hurt. It seems like there may actually be blistering starting, but usually blisters start pretty soon. It may have just been that I did enough. There's definitely some discoloration in the spot. It's not nearly as big as I thought it was, but it makes sense. But it's right on the grip where I grab things, so, where my thumb is holding onto this drink. It's not the entire thumb. It's not the back end. It's this side, more so. You can kind of see the discoloration. It's not great because of lighting and positioning and everything. Focus. Focus! I can't. No, you can see kind of that, like, ring of discoloration there. Yeah, I ended up spending... So... My finger was under running water almost constantly for about an hour. Throughout the majority of that video, and then some. And then I had the smaller cup. Camera's angled too high. I had the smaller cup, and I had it in like this, just sitting there, and I'd swirl it around every now and then, for like another hour and a half. It was because like every time I would take my thumb out, it didn't matter. Or I wanted to say it didn't matter how long it was out, but for the most part, it was like maybe a couple seconds, and then I would start feeling it again. I would start feeling the pain. So I was like, well, put it back. Let's fix that. And it wasn't until about 2.5 hours after the fact that I could kind of do things without just having my finger under, water or running water of some kind. And so I was like, okay, well, so I tested my ability to do a couple of things here and there. I was getting ready because I needed to go get the heater. And there was a moment like before it all really started picking up that I was like, oh, yeah, maybe a little bit. And I think that was about the 30-minute mark roughly, where I was like, I felt like I might be able to do some stuff. And then, it was like one small thing here or there. And I was like, nope, gotta keep going. So, but then it was like, okay, now as long as I don't use that part of the thumb too much, it's just like anything, when you lose it, you realize how much you used it in the first place. Check something here. Okay. So the way that I figured out that my food was good, by instead of just waiting for a specific time, like right now I can smell it because I'm in the same room. So I walked into the other room near the bed, kind of stuck my head over the bed, and then just kind of checked to see if I could smell the food. Because that was when I realized yesterday when the food was good. Like later in the evening, I was able to do that, which was cool. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Food's ready. Because, when you can smell it across the house, it's usually, for the most part, this is not an indicator of all things baked. Let's get that out there. Just because something is baked does not necessarily mean it's properly baked through, does not necessarily mean that you will smell it throughout the house. It's not all for one kind of indicator. It is an indicator for some things, depending. Pizza's a pretty good one because, it's relatively thin and, all of the ingredients are on top and everything like that. So, and it means that they're getting cooked and that, there should be plenty of direct heat on it. Like, the reason I'm only bumping it up to 400 is so that I don't burn it. And because they're cold, and I put them in there while the oven is preheating, so when it's done preheating, I give it a couple more minutes, and then it should be ready to go. These are relatively bigger pieces, more even cooking than through the microwave. A little bit on the lazier side, too, to be honest. And because I want something warm, because, fuck, I don't want to eat cold pizza right now. I'm cold already. I need something warm. I'm hot. Damn it. I'm done with the salads. Unless I decide to buy one of the, Kroger, Food for Less, etc. They have these little sort of pre-made salads that it's like, here's the bowl with all the lettuce, and then on top, here's these little sections of the salad with a dressing of some kind. So it's all pre-portioned. And those are pretty good. Those would be the only salads I'll be eating for the next month. I still haven't really put any effort into finding another place. because I don't fucking know what the hell I would even do. I was looking, but it's all so much of the same. Like, a lot of them is just the exact same listings, too. And that's the thing that's really frustrating. A lot of it is the exact same listings from 4 months ago. It's like... So I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm banking on this whole driver license thing, it feels like. Because it feels like I'm just going to have to leave. Go ahead and open this thing up this time. Oh yeah, that looks good. Guess I'm going to turn this off. Let's turn you off. There you are. Pull out the rack. And you know, I realized this yesterday when I was lifting it out of here the second time after, you know, the initial mistake. I was like, you know, it's probably going to be a while before I'm even comfortable enough to, like, just kind of just grab a thing out of the oven like I used to. I'm not saying that necessarily my habits were bad or good. Either way, it was more of a... Oh shit, I scraped it. Scab off. One of the things about the whole mask situation is that my face doesn't like it. My face likes to be... That's the word I'm looking for. Exposed, I suppose. We felt that on the thumb because I picked up a piece of pizza just now with thumb and index finger, and the index finger got a little burny. Now it's not hot enough or anything. It didn't last long enough to do any damage, but just, you know, goes to show you that, yeah, I'm still gonna deal with it. But yeah, so when I have to wear my mask for an extended period of time, I usually end up getting some kind of acne somewhere around my beard. Which is unfortunate, but it's whatever. I'm going to be wearing... I have a feeling, especially after the whole CDC... I might crack this open a little bit. So one thing you can do to make a cold house not suck, it's not to turn your oven on and just go about your life. Like... People do that. One of my high school friends and his family did that because either they couldn't afford the heat or something, I don't know, or they didn't have a heater, I don't know what it was. But that was often how they would go about heating their house, was use their oven. That's a good way to start a fire. Now, as far as I know, they never started a fire. But just because they never started a fire doesn't mean that it can't happen. It's like, you know, right now people, and this goes back to the whole COVID thing too. It's like, there's a lot of people out there who say that, oh, vaccines are barely effective. I mean, they're wrong, but vaccines are incredibly effective. But, see, one of the reasons why they are effective but don't seem like it is because there's people out there who believe vaccines and masks and all this other stuff don't help, and that they don't even need to worry about it because there's only a 1% chance of death. It's like, okay, good, death, cool. What about all the other shit? What about long COVID? What about having breathing problems for the rest of your life? What about cognitive problems for the rest of your life? What about the possibility that you lose your sense of smell and taste for the rest of your fucking life? Okay, cool. We have a 1% chance of dying in a car wreck in America. That's not a made-up figure. That is approximate number of deaths every year divided by the population. It's 1%. Yet we have safety precautions in place to help avoid those things. We have seatbelts, we have airbags, we have crumple zones, we have roll cages, and so many other things that help to mitigate the possibility of death and or dismemberment while in a car. Now, for whatever reason, and because of these things, we just have people go about their lives not really thinking about these things. I mean, I didn't really know the statistics on car fatalities. I knew that they were a big killer. And I know that we still need to mitigate that. Doesn't mean just because you don't die doesn't necessarily mean that you survive. It doesn't mean that you're living. What if you're basically brain dead, but you're not actually brain dead? Maybe your body is fucked. It's like people think that as long as you're not dead, you're perfectly okay. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Same thing goes with COVID. But because there's so many people for the last 2 years who just couldn't pull their heads out of their asses. Or were following the wrong people, the wrong logic, everything else. I mean, there's still people out there who are all like, obviously Big Pharma is trying to make as much money as possible. I mean, of course that's what their goal is in general. But, and I mean, I get that any rational person could be upset at Big Pharma because of what they've been doing for the last 20 years. And see, that's also another problem we have that needs rectification. We have a society that is constantly under the thumb of a system that doesn't care about them. So much so that, again, it's just like the country who cried war. When we have other things that get people skeptical, afraid, or otherwise straight up paranoid of a system that doesn't like them, that wants to push them down, that's all they're going to think is happening. It's kind of the opposite of the system, the country who cried war. It's the war who cried peace, I guess? I don't know. I get the reason for the distrust. I do. But at the same time, a lot of the distrust morphs into something that is beyond rationale. It's like, this is a new virus. It's a SARS, just like SARS and MERS was before. I remember when people were freaking out about fucking swine flu. But swine flu wasn't that bad. It was still bad. But it didn't have numbers worse than the flu. But it also had happened at a time where we seem to kind of give a shit about that, at least in our political spectrum. And it just goes to show you whoever's in power, specifically president, actually has more power than you might think they do. I remember literally 10, 12, 20 years ago, I was of the mindset that it didn't matter who was president because of all the people who were pulling the strings, and that the president was just a puppet. Well, it's not really the case. There's a lot of people who are Biden haters, critics, etc., who think he is just a puppet or a rubber stamp. But they didn't think the same thing about Trump. They thought that he was passing proper measures and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, well, Why are they different? Well, the difference is you don't like them. That's it, really. And you don't like what he's pushing. And so you think you have to figure out a way to justify in your brain that he's not making these decisions, that these aren't things that he wants, because they're not things that you want. And you think you're a rational person. And so it doesn't matter how much information that you get otherwise. You know you're being a rational person, that these things that are being pushed out are irrational, that they would be devastating, damaging to the country. Because often you've been told that by people that you trust for one reason or another. Instead of trying to think about them. Like, I wasn't some huge fanboy of Obama. Towards the end, I more or less was. But I mean, I still had issue with a lot of his stuff. See, I was willing to take the bad and also not like the good. Or rather, the other way around. Take the good, but also not like the bad. Now, of course, I was more critical of those who were critical of him. But I'm not a fanboy. I may have been more so in his earlier days. But I was also younger, and I was also more naive, and I was also less understanding of things. And I think part of that is there. I think there's sort of an immaturity that because you've invested so much of yourself or whatever into this ideology, and that because you're a human and you're going to take confirmation bias to the nth degree. So anytime you come up with something and it gets proven or validated in some way, you're going to ride that wave. You're not going to stop just because somebody else told you to stop. No, you're on the wave. You're going to ride it. Because if you feel as if you attempt to stop, you're going to crash. You're going to crash and burn. You're going to get crushed by that wave. And so you don't. It's only when there is a moment of calm, when there's not enough info, and where you're in a position of sufficient, I would say, stability, not only in life, but in self and so many other things, that you'll be able to reflect on these things. And I'll tell you, the one thing that gives most people stability in life is money. Right? Anybody who tells you that money doesn't buy happiness is trying to sell you sadness. Because money buys happiness. No, it doesn't. And let's define happiness real quick. You can't have permanent fucking happiness. It doesn't work. Nothing can do that. There is nothing in life that can cause you to be 100% constantly content and happiness. It doesn't fucking work. Anybody who says that is delusional. They're a crazy person. Happiness is fleeting. Happiness is joy. But it's still fleeting. It doesn't last. It doesn't have longevity. Money can do that. Money can buy you fleeting moments of joy. Totally. It can't fix your marriage necessarily. Like, if your marriage is broken and money isn't the reason, you're probably going to get divorced. Unless you two work together to figure out what the actual problem is. And again, financial reasons are kind of one of the number one reasons why people get divorced. But it's not necessarily that they're poor. It could be there's some kind of imbalance. So-and-so is the sole breadwinner. The other person feels like, despite the fact that they don't make any money, they don't feel like they're an equal in the relationship. Something like that. So you have to talk about those things. You have to work with that other person to try to figure those things out. Why you go to marriage counseling? Money solves a lot of people's problems. If a person, like if you've ever noticed, one of the things that people write about when they do a story on somebody who's especially a citizen of the United States, who has gone off the deep end and done something, killed a lot of people, committed some kind of big, international, national crime, typically killing some people, or, going into the insurrection. They'll talk about the changes of that person's life. Like, look at me right now. I had a relatively stable life. It wasn't good, but it was relatively stable. And then it was destabilized. And so, despite the fact that I have some money, it's dwindling. And although I don't have permanent residence, I still have a shelter over my head. I still have some sense of protection of the elements, although it's not as good as it was literally a couple of days ago. But those things cause a person to change their behavior because they have to. They can't be the same person that they were. They can't do the same things. Often, they are unable to do the same things. When you lose your car, you can't do the same things you used to do. You either get another car or you find another form of transportation. Because if like, back when I lived in Texas, the last job I had was working as a security guard. Now, it was pretty much, last job I had was working as a security guard. Where I worked was about, I want to say, about a 30-minute drive. And this is, mostly highway driving, so it's still a pretty decent distance. And unlike LA, 30 minutes actually got you somewhere. Because even the busy streets, or even the not so busy streets in LA, most of them are like residentials. Because there's not a lot of freeways out here. There are, but there aren't. And they don't seem to have really any kind of logic in how they work. But whatever, it doesn't matter. If I had lost my car, I would have had to get another car, which is exactly what happened. When my car went to shit, and it was either pay $2,000 to fix it, which I didn't have on hand, or to get a loan for another newer car so that I could pay, the $250 a month for the car note, or it was like $225, and then it started $250, but then I got a new, I went to another company and paid less. So it ended up being like $220 a month for insurance, despite having a clean record. So I started off paying $250. It was more per month to pay for the insurance of the car than it was to pay for the fucking car. Then found another insurance company, got to pay less, but it still was so close to the actual payment of the car. It was expensive as hell. So I was paying roughly $500 a month. It's $450-ish. I think it was actually closer to like $475. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. Because if I hadn't done that, I would not have been able to go to work. Plain and simple. There was no public transportation near my house. None. It didn't exist. The city that I lived in, as far as I can tell, still doesn't have public transportation. They have medical transportation for people, but that's it. That's like the only sort of public, and I'm not even sure it's public. I'm pretty sure it's private. So I wouldn't be able to get around unless I was like borrowing someone else's car or getting a ride from somebody else, or whatever. And I didn't have coworkers because I was the only security guard at the place. And because my shift started in late afternoon, I wouldn't have been able to get a ride from any of the tenants of the building, tenants being employees, because they all got there at like 8 in the morning. I was getting there at 3:30 in the afternoon. There was no real alternative. I needed a car. So I drove my car to a used car lot, and when I was done with it. And had I had more money, my living would have stabilized more so. But if I didn't have a car at all, I would not have been able to stabilize my life whatsoever. I would have not have been able to do the same things. I would have had to get up stupid early, ride my bike somewhere, which I didn't even have, so I'd have to buy a bike to get to the nearest place where I could ride transit, and then find out the proper connecting routes. And because of where I worked, although it was off of one of the rail lines, it was not off a rail line stop. So then I would have to get off that stop and then ride back, either backtrack or, ride the rest of the distance. I'm pretty sure it had to be a backtrack. But the point I'm getting to is that when your life becomes destabilized, a lot of times people can, not always will, but can do some radical shit. And that's one of the reasons why you'll see these profiles about these people who, whether it's the serial killer stuff that people are, just gorging right now on Netflix, or if it's, stuff talking about the insurrectionists from January 6th, etc., etc. When your life gets turned upside down, a lot of times you're trying to find answers. And a lot of times, because you're not in a rational place, you will try to find what you think are rational answers to an otherwise irrational world. And what does this have anything to do with anything? Well, it has to do with the fact that I was wearing a mask and I got this shit. And why am I wearing a mask? Because COVID still exists. And we're probably going to get another variant soon. And the likelihood is that from now on, COVID is going to be effectively our new flu. Because all you need is something more virulent. All you need is something that is going to be doing pretty much the same thing. It's just like with Homo sapiens and Homo erectus. Homo sapiens killed off Homo erectus, Homo habilis, because they were better at spreading and out-competing their competition. It's not to say that they can't necessarily coexist, but the likelihood is they won't. The flu still exists for now. But Going forward, knowing what I know now, knowing what has happened, when you have all these people who won't listen to science because for one reason or another, they have this thought process in their head that there's all these conspiracies, probably because they have an unstable life and they're trying to find answers. The illness was able to spread and persist long enough to mutate to a less deadlier disease. And so the people who were like, well, it's not as bad as the flu, are going to now be right. Or at least semi-right, because maybe it'll be just about as bad as the flu. Maybe a little worse, maybe a little better. Every year, we'll see. And they're going to be like, see, I was right. You weren't right 2 years ago. But hopefully, with the way that we approached, people want to go back to normal. Normal's what got us here. Normal is what broke us. It's what allowed that thing to spread. And I'm hoping that our new normal will be more masks, more consideration of other people. Even I was guilty of not doing the right thing every flu. I'm going to try to do the right thing every time the flu comes around, whether it's the flu or it's the COVID or whatever. But for now, I'll be wearing a mask because that's what a lot of establishments demand, and I think that's also what I demand of myself and others. Because we fucked up. Weird disappointment, but maybe we can rectify it in the future. Have fun.